This is the Truth Network.
Coming to you from an entrenched barricade deep in the heart of Central North Carolina. Masculine Journey After Hours. A time to go deeper and be more transparent on the topic covered on this week's broadcast. So sit back and join us on this adventure. The Masculine Journey After Hours starts here now.
Welcome to Masculine Journey After Hours. We are very glad to see everybody here today. Wow, we have a full house. Not everyone's here, but a lot of us are here, and so it's good to see you guys.
It is great to see
Good
everybody.
to see you.
Well, thank you.
Like Andy and Sam in the same time in the same studio. It's like old times.
Must be boot camp time.
Yeah, it's getting close to boot camp. Yeah, if we could just get David here, I mean, come on.
Gosh. David. Who's David?
Well, you remember him.
Isn't that series on Amazon or something?
Yeah, House of David.
Yeah.
I think that's the struggle with him making it to boot camp.
It might be.
He's staying in the house.
Yeah. The couch of David might be what the issue is. I'm not really sure.
I hope he heard that.
If he didn't, I'm going to tell him about it tomorrow anyway. But yeah. Anyway, we have a pretty cool topic. And Danny, this originated, believe it or not, for something you brought up. So, yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, even a blind squirrel will find a nut every now and then.
It will, stumble upon it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's life nuggets, things that you've picked up from people who've poured into your life or whatever along the way, or, from TV shows or, boot camp clips or whatever, and, things that just kind of stuck with you and reminding you of the people that gave them to you. And, the things that really changed the course of your life. And that's kind of what we've been talking about.
That's a good way to say it. I couldn't have said it any better. So thank you, Danny. Robbie, you have the first clip of this show. So if you want to tell us about it.
It's exciting because I beat Jim to the clip because he wanted the same clip. And I don't blame him. Because this clip, I like what Danny said, that it changed the course of your life. And I don't know, maybe about 6 years ago, God really called me to highlight the two best pieces of advice I ever got in my life. I don't know if you ever thought about that or just isolating it. Of all that advice you've ever gotten in your life, what's the two best pieces of advice you ever got? And for me, the first one was by Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote the book, The Power of Positive Thinking, which I thought had to do with selling cars. The whole reason I bought the book, it was the way God snuck up on me. But, the best piece of advice I was ever given, and arguably the other one's just as big, but was get up an hour early and read the Bible and pray before you read it, or otherwise you won't understand it. And so I was incensed completely when I heard that. Like, that's the craziest thing I ever heard. You really expect me to do that? All I want to do is sell more cars. You want me to get up early and read the Bible? It doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if you get up early and read the Bible. It will make less sense to you fairly quickly until all of a sudden the Bible's canonized, and at some point in time you come to the conclusion that there is a God and you're not him. And that particular God has a really high standard. I got there in the book of Job. You could take your choice, but in other words, that reading began to completely revolutionize my life, and it revolutionizes it to this day. In other words, I've taken that and continued on getting up earlier and reading more, and as God gives me the grace to allow me to do that and study more, it totally revolutionizes my life. But as you play this clip, which is awesome, it's really the word of a sage. And one of the things I learned early in the masculine journey was, what's the role of the sage? The masculine journey has all these stages. We talk about, there's the, boyhood stage, the cowboy ranger, the warrior, the lover, the king, right? And then you end up with a sage. Oh, what's a sage's job? Point people to God. He's a point man, And so as I began to teach that, the sage stage, it became obvious to me that this clip was the quintessential idea of what a sage does. If you play it.
Maybe I haven't prayed enough. I'm sure that's not the problem. Praying is something we do in our time. The answers come in God's time.
Have I done everything I possibly can? Can you help me?
Son, in 35 years of religious studies,
I've come up with only two hard, incontrovertible facts. There is a God, and I'm not him.
Yeah, there is a God, and I'm not him. And, you know, as a pastor now, the Lord's blessed me to be able to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that ringing in my ears as people are coming to me with things like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say to you. And, you know, you almost always go, okay, how can I point them? How can I point them to God? Because I got nothing, right? And often, if you think you got something, you probably don't have anything. He's got everything, you know. And there is a God, and I'm not him. And so the most beautiful thing about this clip, from my standpoint, was it was instrumental in my brother coming to Christ. He came to a boot camp 3 or 4 years ago. I was teaching on the stage. I played this clip. It hit him between the eyes. Nothing I said, but this clip hit him between the eyes, right? And he got to going home, and he was texting me, Robbie, I can't get out of my mind. There is a God, and I'm not him. There is a God, and eventually ended up pulling over and literally giving his heart to Christ and bawling and all those things that people do. It changed everything, right? And Mark began to read the Bible and get up an hour early and all that stuff. And I've followed his journey over the last, few years and seen what it's meant to his family and all those kind of things. And I just think there's some incredible advice in that clip, but probably I'll still go back to one of the most important things I've ever learned was get up early or late, whatever your case may be, take an hour and spend it in God's Word with Him in that journey, not to know stuff, but to have a conversation with Him, because the Bible is Jesus. And as you talk through it with Him, He will make sense. He will help you identify where you are in your life. He will give you some sense of your identity, some sense of your purpose, and hopefully you're walking with a band of brothers, and hopefully you got some of the other stuff that we do here. Oh man, will it come alive for you so much more if you're there in the Word.
Yep. And a great place to do that would be at boot camp.
Correct.
Which is coming up next week. So go to masculinejourney.org to register. Jim.
And some sage advice you'll get at the boot camp, probably multiple times. People want to talk to whoever just did the speech, the teaching. And there is a response that is you're going to hear if you go to try to talk to someone, especially in the times when we are observing I start saying the code of silence.
Close, covenant.
The covenant of silence. The code of silence isn't here when we have to shut up and not get on the radio.
Cone.
That's the code.
That's what Dub says.
Yes. Well, I thought that was Maxwell Smart.
It was.
But what you will hear is, well, take it to God. Or what did God tell you about that? If we are, and what you said also is brilliant that you took from what's his face. I read the book too, and I can't even remember that was when I was like 12. My father gave me that to read. But you have to pray before you start reading. And it wasn't me, but I had a friend's wife I was talking to.
Are you referencing the power of positive thinking? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it was.
Okay, good. Just to clarify.
You figured that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Norman Vincent Peale.
Yeah. I'm slow.
I knew it was 3 names.
Yeah.
But part of getting older is forgetting just about everything except who's in charge. And that I won't lose. I am 98.7% certain. But what God gave me once talking to the wife of a friend, and she was trying to generate an argument about just reading King James Version. And the church she went to was, And I was sitting there thinking, I said, well, I've got others I like, but that's not going to help her. And I said, there's a wonderful thing about the King James Version. If you don't have the Holy Spirit interpreting it for you, you won't get it. That's really true of all the versions, but unless you're an Old English
you're right.
person, you're not going to get it.
You're right.
Absolutely.
Correcteth, Jimmy.
Thou hast good information.
Sorry.
Mayhaps.
Yeah.
It is true.
Andy, you have the next clip.
So this clip is from a TV show, Raymond. You guys are those
I love
listening.
that show. Everybody loves that show.
Yeah, everybody.
I thought.
Yeah.
Everybody
in
loves
this room knows that I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a lot of truth. I used to watch it quite a bit, and there's a lot of funny stuff going on. But this is one that really brings a lot of truth. So you have Frank and Raymond and Robert have went to the racetrack to let the girls think they're out in counseling, getting family counseling, and they go to the racetrack instead. And so they keep coming back with these false stories of what they're actually talking about with the counselor and what their lesson is for that week. And as you talk through it, some truth starts to bubble out as they start talking and sharing the story, and it really has to do with their backgrounds, bringing up as a kid. I won't go into all that. I'll let the clip play. But we'll come back and talk about it.
Yeah, what's happened right before this, they're talking about their history.
Right, yeah.
Right, why Raymond's a bad dad because he had a bad dad,
Right,
blah,
yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And then Frank speaks up.
Yep.
My dad used to tell me horrible stories about how his father used to hit him when he wasn't hitting me.
Grandpa Joe hit you?
Sure, I got hit every day.
Wow, Dad. I didn't know that it was like that for you.
It was like that for everybody. That's just the way it was.
So your dad's dad hit him, he hit you, and you never really hit us.
I couldn't. I don't know. I was always weaker than him.
Maybe you didn't want to be like him.
I didn't.
So the lesson from that for me was I first time heard it in the wound, and when I started going to the boot camp, I just wanted my marriage back. And the wound, the things that I felt like were a wound for me were probably not what really God wanted to deal with. But then on this clip, I don't think was in some of the original talks, but it was brought into the ministry later on. I saw this, and I had the reaction of most people. That was kind of eye-opening. But it has really opened my heart. The nugget that I get is to have grace for those loved ones around you. Grace for those who loved me, whether they love me or not. They have their own issues. Hurt people hurt people. That was a big part of what I learned as I went along. But whenever you begin to not only just free somebody because Jesus says so, but trying to understand their story. My dad, his father left him at a young age. He was raised by an alcoholic grandfather who knows what to him. And my dad had more failure. Our family broke up, and that hurt me for a long time. That was my father wound. My father disappeared when he needed to be there. With that said, I saw Dad's life go on, and I know what he went through. And his life could have been such more of a mess. His dad ended up committing suicide. Mm-hmm. His life was a mess, and as much as it was hurtful for him to leave, he sowed a lot of good in me. In particular in his life, I begin to look at what I'm doing now. I go on adventures with God. Dad got into the Word later on in his life. A lot of it had to do with around the Old Testament and Hebrew people, just that story, just a lot of different things, and I see all this stuff. I could have measured him simply by the bad that was in his life, but something like that clip is very powerful in helping to see what they overcame you know, what the people that went before us overcame, and even if they didn't and some bad stuff came along, you can still have grace for them and understand that they did it out of ignorance a lot of times. So,
yeah, when you were talking about this before the pre-show, this clip for me was pretty instrumental. I remember seeing it for the first time on Raymond, and I'm like, oh, that's got to be in the wound.
Yeah.
You know, because it's such a good clip because you get an insight.
Yep.
I remember a lot of the way that I parented when I first was a parent was I'm not going to do what my dad did.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. My motivation was to not be like my dad because my dad wasn't a bad person, but there was a lot of wounding there from him. But, you know, and he passed away many, many years before I became a parent. But as I've spent time, my mom was still alive for a while and would answer questions as I'd ask her stuff about my dad. And one of my older sisters is still alive. Two of my older sisters, but one that was my dad's daughter. And she shared a lot about his life. And as I've learned more, like the boys did with Frank here, I learned, wow, my dad really did the best that he could do with what he had. You know, and you start to have grace.
Yep.
Right? You start to have understanding, you know, and then you look back and go, wow, I really wasn't a good parent at times, you know, and hopefully my kids will find that grace, you know, that they'll understand, you know, and the great thing about these boot camps is, you know, my boys have been coming to a lot of them and they've learned some of Dad's story. You know, and because you get up and you share some of your story, not that I would sit and do that around the dinner table or anything, but you know, they learn part of that. And I think that it does start to give them context. It gives them perspective.
It does.
And they can say, oh, there was a lot more going on there. You know, I've learned a lot of things about my mom after she's passed away that really helps me understand how she was the way she was. And things that I thought may have been a weakness, I look at as an incredible strength when you know the rest of the story.
Absolutely.
You know, and so it's really cool. That's a great clip, you know, because you do get perspective.
You do.
Right. And you realize that the people had life before you. And, you know, we get so focused on what happened to us as we should.
Yep.
You know, but then we also have to have the grace to say, okay, let me have compassion for those that came in front of me.
Yep.
You know, I was just going to say that the beauty of understanding the value of wounding is if you're like me, you know, things are happening to you almost every day of your life that create all this negativity in you. And you begin to run what I call scripts. You can call them whatever you want to call them, but all of a sudden in your mind are running all the reasons you need to justify yourself in this particular situation or all these things that you're, right? And you probably have all kinds of things in your life right now, and your mind is just running that stuff, right? God, there's nothing in God that is negative. And so if I'm running anything like that negative in mind, what do I know? It's time to, the check engine light is flashing. Robbie, 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 Robbie. This isn't from me. It's not from me. It's not from me. Let me push into that, right? And clips like that are an invitation, from my standpoint, to what is driving these scripts in my mind? What happened to me in the past? And I was just there this morning, actually, because I'm looking for God to give me some interpretation of that. And I sat there and ran scripts for about an hour and a half, really. And then all the time going, God, I know this is horrible, but I can't stop it.
Yeah.
Show me, show me, show me, show me, show me. Help me, help me, help me, help me. You know, and it's like all of a sudden, he just speaks to me, Robbie, go look at 1 Peter. Just go look at 1 Peter, right? And I didn't get 3 words into 1 Peter. And he hit me right between the eyes, like with exactly what was going on. And it had to do with a wounding that I'd completely forgotten about when I was selling turquoise jewelry in New Mexico in the 70s, right? And so, but it was such a bad wound and so connected to what had happened recently that, like, what a value it is that you can go back in there, you can forgive people that really hurt you, you can have grace for the people who had, you can find the agreements that you made inside of that, which we've talked about agreements, I don't know how many times on this show, where I've made some agreement that I'm never going to do this again, I'm never going to do that. Oh my goodness, the healing that's available if you understand the process and what God has been trying to flash that check engine light in your mind saying, you're running scripts, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt.
The check engine light's kind of fresh for me. Thank you there, Robbie. Every time you say that, it's just like...
Sam, are you running scripts?
I'm running a few of them right now, actually. I got to just dig into those. But we will start with some advice from Curly, okay? So I've got a couple clips back to back here, and they're about as opposite as they can be, honestly. But one of them is a boot camp clip that has meant a lot to me. A lot of the boot camp clips have, and this was from City Slickers. And in this clip, the main character, Billy Crystal's riding along with Curly, and he's just talking about life.
Jack Palance.
Jack Palance. And so I want to listen to what he has to say here and talk about why it was important to me.
What's so funny?
You city folk, you worry about a lot of
My wife basically told me she doesn't want me around.
Is she a redhead?
Well, I'm just saying.
How old are you? 38.
39.
Yeah. You all come up here about the same age, same problems. Spend about 50 weeks a year getting knots in your rope, and then you think 2 weeks up here'll untie 'em for you. None of you get it. Do you know what the secret of life is?
No, what?
This.
Your finger?
One thing. Just one thing. You stick to that.
That's great, but what's the one thing?
That's what you gotta figure out.
I think at times when I've listened to that, I think, okay, what is that one thing that's really important to me? And there's not bad answers that I go to, but for the longest time I didn't go to the right answer. I would say, my family. And that's a good thing to have your family to be the one thing, that top important thing. But, as you get older and life things changes and, I'm no longer married, right? So that's not there. And my kids are kind of out on their own. And so I'm kind of on my own, right? Things kind of change. And not that they're not valuable and not that it's not important or they're not a priority. But the one thing, for me that I always got to remember is God, right? Because absence of Him, none of the other stuff really matters, right? And I have to use that a lot because I'll get wrapped up in the world and all the things that it's thrown at me. And I got to remember that the priority, the one thing I got to dig into and point into is God. And through that, all the other stuff becomes clear. And only through that.
And it's hard, though, because we default to not.
Right.
We default to God light or God not, Yeah. And that's our fleshly nature. But, to press into that, that's the one thing.
The one thing. And I do have one other clip I'm going to go ahead and play, and it is kind of the exact opposite. This is probably one of the best advice I ever got in the secular world from work, and it was from a boss. And I'm going to go ahead and play it. This is from a show, I hate to even tell you what it was. It's 2.5 Men, but you have two brothers. One's dating a girl, and she's kind of living off of them. And so he's got an idea of how to get her off of kind of their payroll, so to speak, in a way. So let's listen to that.
I found her a job. Within a few weeks, she'll be able to afford her own place, and she won't have to depend on me anymore.
Where is she working?
She's going to be my receptionist.
That's your plan? Why, it's brilliant.
What? She's attractive, she's friendly, and she's more than capable of answering the phones.
Alan, you ever hear the expression, you don't crap where you eat? Well, you, my friend, are dropping plunkies all over the dessert cart.
Okay, you have a better solution?
No. It's your girlfriend, your office, your life. Screw it up however you think best.
Well, that was memorable, if nothing else. I did have great advice from one of my first bosses in construction, the guy that really kind of poured into me and gave me a lot of good advice along the way. He wasn't around often, but when he was there, he gave me good advice. And probably the first thing he ever told me is that don't crap where you eat. Right, and what he was trying to say is don't get mixed up in things that's going to take away and cost you your job. It had to do with your job primarily, and it's driven everything I've done for the last 40 years in construction. That I always think about that. It's one of the filters that I run things through of, am I really putting anything in the way that can cost me my job? Am I doing things with the right integrity? Am I keeping things above board? And that impacts you in other parts of your life. when you use that as a filter of, am I putting the priority in the right spot? If my family's my priority, am I doing anything to risk my family? Right? And so you can kind of apply it in a lot of different places, but that's one word of advice that I got over 40 years ago that I don't always consciously think of it, but it's a filter that I run things through as I'm looking at stuff to say, okay, what do I need to do here? My boss will tell you pretty frequently, I call him and tell him when I mess up, right? Because I'm just going to be very upfront with things. Because I don't...
And they like that.
Well, and I don't want it to come back later and they say, why didn't you tell me?
Right.
Right? And it still goes back to Vern Lewis years and years ago, and he's probably not alive anymore. He's
virtual Vern at this point.
Virtual Vern, yeah. But telling me that, and it's impacted a lot of how I do things, especially in business, but in other aspects of my life. And I'm very grateful for that advice, as crass as it sounds. It was good and it was memorable, and I promise you won't forget it. Right?
Yeah, my father put it to me early on. It was, you don't do that in your mess kit.
Yeah. Exactly.
It wasn't where you eat. It was like,
that was the way I heard
yeah, you heard it the same way I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a good plan. But
no,
it clearly helps on the whole idea of priorities, which are a gigantic part of life.
It is. And so if I'm putting God first with the one thing, and I'm taking care of not to do things I shouldn't do, it'll help me be in a better place.
And a cleaner mess kit.
It is a cleaner mess kit. Yeah, it's a lot more fun eating in that area. But yeah. Anyway, as I challenged you in the last show, be asking God this week, what are some life nuggets that you've been giving me? And remember where they came from. God, where did you get those? And then what have I done with them? And what more do you want me to do with them? And more than that, let God love on you this week and turn around and love on others well. And go register for the boot camp that's coming up March 13th through 16th. That's only a little over a week away. We'd love to have you there. There's still plenty of room. It's at an amazing place. You got plenty of time. Go do it. We love you. We'll talk to you next week.
This is the Truth Network.